Hello, Lulu, and welcome back to the More Money Podcast. I am your host, Jessica Morehouse, and I've been waiting to interview my next guest for 10 years. But I did not have the technology that I needed to actually do the interview because it was the Stone Ages for podcasting. Thank goodness for remote recording and innovation, because finally I'm able to interview the legend David Chilton on the show. If you're Canadian, you might already be one of the over 2 million people who've read his original book, The Wealthy Barber, which first came out in 1989. But the world is very different now than 89, and that is why David has completely rewritten his book for the modern age. So you need to grab a copy of The Wealthy Barber, the updated edition, which is exactly what we talk about in this episode. But in case you don't know much about the legend in the personal finance space, David, he has been demystifying personal finance for over 35 years. And like I mentioned, he's the author of The Wealthy Barber and The Wealthy Barber Returns. He was a dragon on CBC's Dragon's Den. And he's also got a podcast, which I was very lucky enough to be a guest on about this time last year, called The Wealthy Barber Podcast. Now, we've got a lot to talk about, and he even answers some listener questions. So without further ado, let's get to that interview with David. Welcome, David, to the More Money Podcast. So excited to finally have you on the show. I don't know if you remember this, but I asked you to be on the show 10 years ago when I was a baby podcaster. I mean, fair enough. I didn't have, you're like, cool, I don't know how we could do it technology-wise, because you didn't live in Toronto at the time. I think I was only doing it from my apartment. And I'm like, I actually don't know how to do that either. This was 10 years ago. So this was before Riverside, before Zoom. So I'm so glad technology has figured itself out.
Well, don't forget, I had a rotary phone. And also I had a BlackBerry until very recently, like 3 weeks ago. So yeah, I was probably the wrong guy to try to interview 10 years ago.
I'm glad the wait was worth it. So I'm so excited to finally have you on this show. As you know, I've told you when I was on your podcast, which everyone should check out, excellent podcast. You were the first personal finance author and personal finance book I ever read. And it really was that kind of gateway for me. And it's kind of crazy to think 14, 15 years later, here I am, and largely because of your original book, The Wealthy Barber, and now you're back with an updated version. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the original version came out in 89. Is that right?
It did. I mean, I'm very old. In fact, you know what's funny, Jessica? I'm not even kidding when I say this. When I went to do some TV interviews last week, people seemed a little surprised I was alive. Like a couple of people that were like, geez, I saw it was an update and I thought maybe somebody else had done the update, but it's actually you doing the update. They're going, that was 36 years ago. Well, they figured I was 50 when I wrote it. And so 36 years later, obviously I'd be really old. And if I wait another 36 years, I've often said people don't read it because it will be gibberish by the time I get to that level. So yeah, it was a long time ago, but I'm obviously glad that you read it and it had an impact, and look at the things you've gone on to do with your book was a big success. And I enjoyed following that, by the way. I follow you, as you know, on Instagram, and I thought you did a great job of capturing all the bookstore visits and the speeches.
Thank you.
It seemed like you got a great response, great draw at a lot of the talks. So good for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Again, fangirl over here. That's so exciting to hear that you even follow me on Instagram. So thank you so much. But the first question I have, because honestly, when I talk to so many people, The Wealthy Barber is also their kind of gateway book. And so I want to know, why did you want to kind of rewrite it, and why specifically now? I read the updated version, cannot honestly remember the original version because it had been like 15 years.
Neither can I.
Yeah. So who cares? Who cares about it? Get the new one. But why did you really want to rewrite it and make sure it came out now?
A few reasons. I'm not saying this jokingly either. I mean, some of it was my age. If I was going to ever rewrite it, I had to do it. Now I'm running out of time. Obviously, I'm
You're
old.
not that old.
I'm old. I am. I honestly am that old, because it's such an intense writing period. To put it into novel format takes so long. This was 16 months of full-time writing, 40 and 50 hours a week. And as I mentioned to you, I think off air when we did our podcast, I do a lot of testing as I write. And that leads to a tremendous amount of rewriting, et cetera. And the editors are pulling their hair out, but it's a long process. So I thought now was the right time, selfishly because of my age, but much more importantly, people needed help.
Yeah.
My kids are in their 30s. I see what they're going through. I see what all their friends are going through. Then, of course, my friends' kids are in their 20s and 30s. They're asking all the same questions. They're dismayed. They're down a little bit about the cost of everything, not just real estate, but the cost of living. And I thought, let's go back to the format. It obviously works. It takes the intimidation out, but give it a complete rewrite. We call it an update, but I don't think that does it justice. It's a new book,
Yeah,
new
it's a
character
totally new
names, new characters, and everything I think people need to know is in there. And I try to be very realistic about the challenges and not just gloss over them and say you can do all this, because you can't do all this in most cases. And that's what happened. I started out thinking it would take me 4 to 6 months to do the rewrite.
Yeah.
And then it actually took me longer than it did to write the original by 4 months. So yeah, it was quite a process, but I enjoyed most of it. I mean, as you know, being a writer is very tough. It's very isolating.
Well, I've only done it once and it almost killed me. So
yeah, don't do it again. And I mean, like sometimes you write for 3 weeks and then you throw it all out.
Yeah.
And, I had many runs like that. Or one time I wrote the chapter on ownership. I wrote the middle part. I thought it was very good. I actually tested it on 3 people. They didn't like it.
Oh.
And so this is why you test, but it's also frustrating because it had taken me quite a while to get what I thought was a breakthrough. So that whole process is exhausting. I'm thrilled that it's out in the market now, though.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God it's over. Now you can enjoy yourself. I'm curious. I mean, you obviously remember what you wrote in the original book, but what are some of the biggest differences between both books? And are there any huge differences? Or because I saw, when I was reading, I'm like, okay, a lot of the advice is still the same because it's good and it works, the pay yourself first and
Right.
Investment advice and things like that. But what were some big changes that you're like, oh yeah, things are different now?
I'd say there's ways to summarize them maybe into 3 buckets. I mean, the first book really talked a lot about mutual funds because they were the only equity product available. There was no ETFs available in Canada, and index funds were just slightly breaking in through one of the financial institutions. So now we have ETFs. They're a lot more cost-effective way to get at a pooled equity fund, et cetera, and therefore tend to outperform the vast majority of the funds. That was certainly number one. Then number two, when I wrote the book, again, it's such an old book, it only had RRSPs to deal with.
Yeah.
But now we have TFSAs, we have FHSAs, we have the home buyers plan, on and on and on. And so I had to weave all that in. That ended up becoming the most challenging part because it's not enough to explain all the new accounts. You have to help people prioritize. So they can't do them all. Which one makes sense in your particular circumstance? And then the third big difference is because I've been out there so long, I've seen what works and what doesn't work for people. So I had a lot more to say in the chapter on saving savvy and on what tips would work and how to set them up. And that chapter, I'm very pleased to say, is probably drawing even more feedback than the chapter on pay yourself first. That chapter really seems to be resonating with people. So yeah, those are the 3 primary differences. And then I had some new characters involved, et cetera, because I wanted to cover off more scenarios.
Yeah.
When I first did the broad outline, I thought, I'm not sure I can do this with 3 people.
Yeah, it's a lot
So
of
I
people.
introduced a 4th person. It is into the care. But then the other thing is, one of the wives of the narrator, he doesn't have more than one wife, but the wife of the narrator, she plays a very big role in the book. You never meet her, you never see her. But it's funny because I've had 3 different people say she's my favorite character in the whole book. I don't know if that's a good sign for my writing or a bad sign. I'm not sure which.
I think it's a good sign. I think it's definitely a good sign. I know the one thing that I noticed is I think this is a big difference, and this is a conversation that's been happening, especially with younger people, is kind of your take on real estate. Because I feel like prior, all of the kind of more traditional finance books really did talk about how real estate's a great investment. And you kind of talked about, well, things are different now, and it may or may not be the right choice for you. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that and why you want to kind of get that across to younger readers, especially?
Yeah, I've been fairly pro real estate as an investment throughout my education career, which is, 40-ish years now. But in the last couple of years, 5 years, I've become nervous on a lot of fronts. I mean, just the cost of the real estate, even though rents are up too, but the basic math is becoming more and more difficult to make work. The part that doesn't get enough attention is beyond the mortgage cost related to the high cost of the real estate itself. Property taxes have gone up at greater than inflation rate levels in most areas in the country. So have things like upkeep, home insurance, et cetera, et cetera. The math is very stretched right now. Then you've got problems, especially in BC and especially in Ontario, with the tenant review boards and all of the games being played by a lot of the tenants that have made it very difficult to collect the rent in a timely fashion and deal with the challenges and so on and so forth. You add it all up, and I don't think it provides the same opportunity. Remember, the last 30, 40 years, we had declining interest rates, and real estate had a fantastic run. And now, even though there's still a shortage, especially of detached homes, I don't think we'll post the same performance numbers. So when the cash flow math is stretched, and you don't think you're going to post the same performance numbers, it's not as exciting. However, 2 years from now, I could write a changed version of the book where it then again looks good because there have been things come into play that have made the pricing a better one. So who knows? But right now, I don't think it's as good an opportunity for most young investors.
Yeah. And quite honestly, that is kind of my, the experience, or that what I'm hearing from a lot of people my age who, read those books, bought real estate. Some of them have done well, but I think they have been owners of real estate, not just principal residence, but like, investments for over a decade, maybe 15 years plus. And then some that recently got into it in the next 5 years. And honestly, those people are having a hard time. I don't hear any good stories, quite honestly.
For sure.
I'm like,
no, if you went into the pre-construction condo business in Toronto in the last 3-4 years, obviously it's been a struggle. And then again, we mentioned the tenant problems, and they are getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
And so it has made it quite tricky. And I think there are alternatives out there. And the other thing that's happened is when I was young, and remember, this is 40 years ago, buying real estate with very little down as an investor was much more possible than it is now. There were creative ways to do it, creative ways to partner. Now, partially just because of the extreme prices of residential real estate, it's become more and more challenging. So for the people starting out, which is where the Wealthy Barbers aimed, the people in their 20s and 30s, it is trickier to get in, even if you see that as a good opportunity.
No, exactly. Now you talk in your book, and I really loved how you did introduce like those new kind of financial tools, different account types, TFSAs, FHSAs, which are very new, talking about low-cost ETFs. What do you find that Canadians still don't understand about these? Because they now have been around. I mean, the TFSA has been around since 2009, but still, there's still a lot of misinformation or just confusion about some of these. So what did you really want to get across in your book?
Well, what's really interesting? I think the most misinformation out there right now is about the oldest of the products, and that's RRSPs.
Yeah.
You're hearing a tremendous number of people who lost sight of the reality that you have to pay tax when you take the money out and are now saying, I never should have done that in the first place. But that's not the case. The vast majority of people who contributed to RRSPs benefited from doing so. In fact, in most cases, if it's your retirement pool of capital you're trying to build, it usually wins the race versus the TFSA. In most cases, there's some specifics the book talks about you have to think through. So the misinformation around RSPs has really grown in the last 5 to 10 years to the point of it's very frustrating for me. FHSAs in 2025 finally took a big step forward in terms of awareness.
Yeah.
People like you have done a very good job telling people this is the ultimate no-brainer.
Yeah.
If you are eligible, it is the perfect product. You get the tax deduction up front, like the RSP, but it comes out tax-free like the TFSA and grows on a compounding basis tax-free, although most people tend to invest it quite conservatively. So they're great products. I talked about the home buyers plan as well, and when it makes sense and when it doesn't, et cetera. So weaving all of that together again and then showing people, how do you prioritize? Most people can't do all of this, obviously.
Yeah.
How do you figure out what makes sense for you, depending on your circumstances? That was the challenging part of putting those chapters together. And again, I was really helped by having multiple characters in the barbershop because I could cover off various scenarios.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, if someone were to come to you, say like a younger person in their 20s just getting started, where would you kind of put their, focus on? Would it be the TFSA over the RRSP, or would you still be like the RRSP is still pretty great?
I think if they're in a lower income area, the TFSA can be the right move. A lot of this is you're trying to figure out where is my current tax bracket versus what my future tax rate's going to be on withdrawal. And that's a tricky calculation because nobody knows 20 and 30 and 40 and 45 years down the road what your tax rate will be. So it's a little challenging, but a lot of the very young people who come to me to ask me basic questions or show me their spending summary, they often do go TFSA, FHSA first, by the way, if they haven't bought a home, because again, they aren't making big money yet and they're saving for a down payment. Now, interestingly, if you're saving for a down payment and you and your partner, if you have one, can afford to max the FHSA, the $8,000 a year each, it's often better to go the RSP route because then you can take advantage of the home buyers plan too. And because you're saving with pre-tax dollars, you can build it up to a higher level than you could the TFSA. That's often forgotten, by the way. Yeah. There's a lot of comparisons back and forth, but the simple fact is you can get more in the RSP with the pre-tax dollars. So if getting the down payment together is hard, and it is for everybody, that may be your next best choice after the FHSA.
Yeah, and my biggest issue with the TFSA is first, a lot of people still don't understand that you can invest it. People still think it's just a savings account. But also they're a little too flexible in that they're very easy to take money out. Whereas the RSP, the best part about it is there is kind of the idea that you're like, don't touch it. And that's like the best thing you should be doing when it comes to investing is do not touch it. But TFSAs, they're just so easy to open the door and touch that in there.
You make two fantastic points there. And, things that I bump up against all the time. I think in the last few years, the TFSA investing has improved.
Yeah.
That 5 and 10 years ago, so many people were just essentially leaving it in cash or putting it in short-term GICs. I do see a lot of people now using it as their retirement fund and then using ETFs. And that's getting better, but it's still a problem, to your point. But the other point you make is one that does not get enough attention because it is so accessible and you can take it out tax-free. You regain the contribution room starting the next year. People tend to use it for non-emergency emergencies.
Yep.
And we see them sabotaging it. And of course, it's tough to catch up, even though you can by law. It's very difficult to get the monies back together again and get them all in there. Plus, you've foregone some years of compounding, et cetera. So its flexibility works for it. But with a lot of us, it can work against it too. And so that's a very, very good point by you and see it all the time in real life.
Now, another thing that you talk about that I think in general is being talked about a lot more over the past couple of years and the personal finance world is the behavior component because, you have some great advice on practical how-tos, but as you and I both know, there's also, the human aspect is that we're imperfect and we're just bad at saving and bad at investing because of our innate kind of nature. What did you really want to kind of tackle about that in this new edition?
I talked a lot about those types of things in 2010. The Wealthy Barber Return came out in 2011, and I was fascinated by the whole subject area and done a lot of reading in behavioral finance, behavioral economics, et cetera. But really, most of the Wealthy Barber Return stories came from real life, from seeing all the financial plans I see. This sounds dramatic, but it's. I would bet my life that it's true. I have probably seen more financial plans than anybody in the world.
Wow.
Like people won't stop sending them to me.
People send them to you? Like how do you get your hands on them?
Oh my gosh.
People email you their
thousands and thousands
and you're like,
of plans over the years.
This is private. You should probably not send this to my inbox.
No, I get them all the time. We used to get them sent to us physically all the time. Photocopies probably preceded your life, but and spending summaries, we get them all the time.
Wow.
Questions kind of nonstop coming in because people have grown up with the Wealthy Barber for 40 years. They don't know whom to trust. And they say, hey, can you answer this? Can you take a look at this? Whatever. And so as you put all of this together, you see a lot of the common mistakes. I mean, I fell in love with spending summaries, not because I'm smart, but because of the impact I saw they were having. In fact, if you go back to the original Wealthy Barber, it gives very little attention to spending summaries. It's like a paragraph. And then now, after 30 years of watching people handle their money, 40 years, you go, okay, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And those are one of the most effective tools. In fact, sometimes I think they're the most effective tool to jumpstart people's financial planning process. But what I've been able to do is kind of watch the common mistakes people make. And to your point, we're all, full of errors. We're all humans. We dive into things we shouldn't, and we're gambling too much for young men now. We're spending too much for everybody, et cetera. What techniques can work? What ways do you position some of the basic advice? And so a lot of the books, including even The Psychology of Money, the most famous of all the books by Morgan, you'll say a lot of the same things, but how do you come at them? What examples do you give? How do you shine a light on them that gets people going, okay, I get that. They're more likely to be nudged towards a new path. And so chapter 9, the Saving Savvy chapter, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I'm very proud of that chapter. I really am. I mean, I put a lot of work in on that. It was probably the first time I've written anything in the 3 books where it hasn't been revised much through the testing process. It tended just to resonate with people. And already we're getting a number of people saying, hey, I've made a couple changes because of that. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be impactful in getting people to spend less on cars, but I hope the way I tried to tackle it, I am. And I did hit a few of the themes from the Wealthy Barber Returns, but tried to come at them differently because of the character involvement. And that seems to be going over well too. So that was a fun chapter to write. It took me a long time because it's the longest chapter, but I think it has a lot of good material in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Just because you mentioned that there's a lot of people who send you their financial plans or their financial summaries. Like how much of that did make it into the book? Or I'm also curious too, there's probably people who read your original and been doing all of that advice all these years. Have you heard, I guess, a ton of success stories or like, look at where I started, where I am now after all these years?
Well, you'll be amazed by this, but every day.
Yeah.
So literally every day we hear from people who say, I'm retired because I read The Wealthy Barber and I did this, or I saw you on stage. Yeah, that part of this has all been very cool. And I learned the basics through that book and I passed it on to my kids or whatever else. But you're right. A lot of the stories that find their way in, especially to the updated version, were in essence real life stories. I don't know if you remember in the one chapter, they're talking about side gig income and some of the weird businesses that people can put together. I just took those from all the people get in touch with me.
Yeah.
And said, okay, I'll just take some of those examples and weave them right into the book. Like the one where the lady was renting out her fenced backyard for dogs, et cetera. I just took that.
Yeah.
And so again, those are all real life examples. And a lot of the stuff in the book is just from all the conversations I have with people, but it's put into the characters' mouths in the book. And I think that's why it rings true.
If you had to pick just one idea from this new edition or new book, really new version, completely, that could change someone's financial life in the next decade, what would it be and why?
No doubt it would still be pay yourself first.
Yeah.
If you look at the impact of the first book, I mean, I'd like to think it did a lot of good things, but that was the big issue. It kind of went at people and said budgeting doesn't work particularly well for most people. Spending summaries are actually more impactful, by the way, but pay yourself first does. Now, the problem is now credit is ubiquitously available. So as I've said, in a lot of times on stage, people pay themselves first, but they offset it by taking on a lot of debt. And so the liability side of their net worth statement is almost growing in tandem with the asset side. So you have to control both, but paying yourself first, not letting human nature get involved, that's very, very important. And then another fundamental message you're always trying to deliver is if you start doing these things right, you listen to your podcast, you read your book, you do start doing all these things on a regular basis, you're much happier in life. That there's this perception out there that there's a great sacrifice involved. Yeah. Okay, yes, I'm planning for the future like Jessica and Dave want me to, but I'm less happy because I'm not going out as much. I'm not going on 3 trips. I'm going on 1, et cetera. It's not that way. If 40 years of empirical evidence show me it's quite the opposite. In fact, Morgan Housel talks about this all the time, that when people get on this proper path and they start doing the right things, they're less stressed, they're more happy, they're not defining themselves by stuff. They're not always trying to keep up. They're very pleased about their saving for their future and they're doing the right thing. So those are two of the big messages. And then to go back to the spending summary, I really did hit that hard in the book. And again, a lot of it's because I'm sitting back and watching all the people in my life who've done them, where I've had direct access to the evidence and gone, wow, like just by going through a 3-month exercise of chronicling everything they're spending, it's made them subconsciously, in many cases, change their spending habits. They haven't even gone, I got to spend less there. They've just started naturally taking care of it. And they've been able to complement the pay yourself first efforts with even more savings. So that's another principle that I'm pretty aggressive on and think nobody loses doing a spending summary.
No, I mean, that's exactly what I do. And it works just fine. And I'm sure pay yourself first. I'm pretty sure it was the first time I learned it was your book, and I've been doing that ever since, and it was the best thing I ever did. And I tell everybody to do it because it's such a simple thing, and the data shows, the research shows it works. So keep on doing it.
Okay, I got to ask you a question though. I'm going to ask 2 questions on your spending summary. Number 1 is, do you do it ongoing? Like you seem like the type who might. Okay,
I track it every month.
Here's some interesting data.
Okay.
There's a good feeling out there for some research that you're better to do it once a year for 3 months. That when you do it on an ongoing basis, you become a little bit numb to it all. And you're less likely to notice the big changes, the big mistakes, the big reroutes you could take, et cetera. So doing it periodically instead of constantly may be more impactful. And do you use an app or do you use a pen and paper?
I've got my own spreadsheets. I've got my own budget spreadsheets that I use.
That's good. I mean, I think anything you've developed on your own or the old-fashioned way, me, I'm 112 years old. I use Bristol board. That tends to be more impactful than just grabbing those apps where, again, you're a little bit numb to it as it just goes into the categories. So the people I've seen most impacted by this have literally been writing everything down. And again, I will tell you, again, to the listeners, nobody does these things and doesn't learn 2 or 3 valuable lessons. Nobody. Even people who think they've mastered their money and they're spending the exact right amount and saving the exact right amount always come back and say, you know what I learned? I'm spending way too much in this one area for the joy I'm getting from it. So I can shift some money over here. I'm not going to save anymore because I was already saving to my targeted level, but I think I can spend more efficiently. I can spend where I get more bang for the buck. So yes, doing these is very, very beneficial.
Yeah, no, I've got my budget, do that every January. And then I track me, and my husband also tracks his spending. And then we have our joint spending. So we got 3 different kind of spending tabs. And then we track our net worth every month. And it is, and then every year we take an assessment of like what happened. Do we want to shift anything? And and we're never perfect. We're never perfectly
Nobody
on
is.
budget, but we do learn a lot. And it's great just to have that data, that information to be like, what happened? And also you can take a look at certain months to be like, oh, I remember that was a spendy month because of this. Okay, well, let's try to change our behavior moving forward. But, and I've been doing it.
That's a great point you make about not being perfect,
Oh,
though.
yeah.
Preet Banerjee, whom you know well.
Yeah.
I mean, Preet often talks about some of us are going too far now with trying to be perfect and optimizing every financial decision down to 3 decimal places. And it self-sabotages us. It takes away the fun and therefore eventually breaks down.
Yeah.
People who tend to do this well, do it well, not perfectly. People who do it perfectly, it tends not to work out so well. So again, that balance isn't unusual, but it sounds like you and your husband are right on top of things. But let's be honest, you're a financial educator. If you're not on top of things, we have a bit of a problem here.
I mean, I should be good at this stuff and should really like doing this. But yeah, no, I've been doing it for 9 years now. And it's just like, you do it long enough, then it's just like, it's like a habit, like doing the laundry or something like that. Like you just have to do it and you do it and then it's done. And it's very easy with a spreadsheet, copy, paste, all that kind of stuff.
I have to start doing the laundry. That's something I need to do more of. People talk to me about that
You know what? I do it. I was just doing it yesterday. We have a bit of a nice weekend routine where Sundays is when we clean the house. We have our preferred cleaning duties. He does the vacuuming. I do the laundry and it works out. But then it's like, it doesn't feel like a chore because it's like, it's Sunday. This is what we do. And you put on a show, listen to some music, figure that out.
Your husband must have been very proud of your book success.
Yeah, well, that's why I got, I put him in the beginning of the book. He was, what was it, my acknowledgement or he was right at the front.
Right.
Really lucky
Dedication.
guy. Dedication, that's it. He was, yes. He got the very...
Geez, you've forgotten already. You've forgotten already what you did for the guy. My husband? No, yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, no, he was very proud. And I mean, he's seen it all. We've been together 18 years. So he's really seen not just me, like, go through all of this from blogger to where I am today, but also my like financial journey, which is actually pretty unique, which is kind of crazy.
And plus he had to put up with all of the writing, and then that's an isolating experience. It's draining. You tend to be a little tired. In my case, is a little cranky.
I should ask him about that.
So.
For me, I feel like it's so far away because that was back in 2023 that I just have rose-colored glasses. I'm like, wasn't that a great, beautiful year of me writing? And I'm sure he would say very different.
Are you doing another book?
We'll see. I mean, I'm still just, I need a break. Like, I feel like I haven't actually had a proper break all year. It's been like the busiest year. So I just, this will air before or after, but I also just passed the QAFP exam. So that's what I was also busy doing during the fall, was studying and trying to pass that exam. So I just need a bit of a break.
And you were saying that stuff doesn't necessarily come perfectly naturally to you. You said in one of your posts.
That's why I was shocked when I passed. I'm like, oh my God, I did. Maybe I'm not such
Good for you.
But that's the thing. I think, and maybe that's why people relate to me. And it's like, I really did not come from a place of I'm good at math, I'm good at economics. No, I was terrible at all of those subjects in school. I have a fine arts degree. So if I can learn this stuff and like it for what it is, not the math of it, it's like, I like the stories. I like what it can do. I like the kind of puzzle that it is. And that's kind of where I try to encourage people. It's like, you don't have to be good at math or have an MBA or whatever. Anyone can learn this stuff. And again, that's why your book, I think, touches so many people, is because the characters feel like they're either, I can put myself into that and those, characters' shoes, or I know those people. They feel like they're my neighbors or my friends. Like it's such a warm, kind of cozy place to be in, and you're learning this stuff not like a textbook, or some of these books are so technical. And I remember being in my 20s trying to read those books, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then it makes you like not want to learn anymore, because you think, oh, maybe this isn't for me, maybe I'm not smart enough. And then having a book that's written in such a great narrative style, it makes you feel like, oh no, you're welcome here and this is for you. So I think that's so special. I wanted to do just a little bit of a lightning round of questions, and then I actually asked my audience for questions to ask you, which I think will be kind of fun to ask you. Okay, what was the hardest financial lesson you learned writing this edition?
I think I probably, during the writing, I'm not sure there'll be one thing that jumps out, but I think all the research leading up to it and talking to everybody, there's no doubt it's the price of homes and what they're doing to the younger generation. I mean, it's just so difficult. And a lot of the boomers, frankly, still don't get it. And so when you talk to them, they're still saying things like, it was very tough when we bought. Well, it was at certain times.
Sure,
rates went up to 19%.
Rates,
but in general, it's harder now. And what's so much more difficult now is the down payment.
Yeah.
because interest rates don't affect the down payment. And of course, if you're trying to hit the 20% mark and homes are 200 and 300% more expensive relative to incomes than they were in, say, 1995, well, obviously putting the down payment together becomes very tough. But also beyond that, as I mentioned at the start of the interview, it's just a general cost of living. I would argue the CPI does not state accurately what most of us have dealt with on the inflation front.
No.
So the big pain point when I was putting the book together and preparing for a couple of years was all the conversations with people who are saying, Dave, I'm trying to do a lot of this stuff, but with the cost of living being where it is, and I live in Toronto, for example, what am I missing? I can't get there.
Yeah.
It's not complex financial planning. It's arithmetic.
Yeah.
I can't get there on the arithmetic. Can you help me? And that's kind of where I got started in all this. But I will admit that some people's incomes are such that depending on where they're living, it's going to be tough for them to save anything in these very challenging times.
Yeah, hence why, I mean, I've always had multiple jobs because it's like when I was in my 20s and living in Vancouver, a very expensive city, with 2 roommates, I could not live on 1 income. And unfortunately, that is sort of the norm now. And it's unfortunate, but it is the reality.
We joke, choose your parents wisely has become the most important commandment in personal finance. But even though people laugh at it, it's really a sad comment that we've somehow gotten there, that without parental help in certain markets, it's very difficult. And of course, I'm sure you have a lot of single friends. Can you imagine being single and trying to tackle the home ownership challenges, the rent challenge, et cetera? It's very tough. So, I mean, you've read the home ownership chapter. I didn't gloss over all of that. I didn't say, no, you can do this easily. Just do this, this, and this. It wasn't like that at all. I talked about how hard it is and how to get there, you're going to have to make other major sacrifices, et cetera, because that's the reality of our times.
Yeah. And the, sooner you kind of like, okay, this is it, then it'll be easier. I think it's hard for people to try to match things that aren't matching. But my second question is, if you could go back and give young Dave one piece of financial advice, what would it be? And by young Dave, like when you were just starting out, what's one thing now with all of
obviously it would be buy Apple.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be it for sure.
We could go back in time.
Kidding aside, by the way, when you look at the tech stocks and I follow all of that very closely, I think something that almost all of us got wrong was the incredible power of the network effect. And so we looked at what these stocks were trading at when they first got rolling, and we said, oh my gosh, by price earnings multiple ratios, by any of those things, they're way overpriced. We didn't understand the network effect and how these things just grow and grow and grow. And there's a stickiness to all of that as well. And therefore they weren't overvalued. In fact, they were often dramatically undervalued relative to where they were going to go in the future. So I would teach myself about the network effect if I could go back and speak to younger Dave. But remember, younger Dave, in my case, that's like a half a century ago. I don't even really remember younger Dave, sadly.
Outside of saving and investing, what's one non-financial habit you think contributes most to long-term financial success?
Okay.
I know.
I'm going to give a strange answer to this, but I think having cheap hobbies be a big part of your life.
Oh, yeah.
It helps you to save. It's a great way to spend a lot of time. It keeps you growing. Depending on the hobby, it often keeps you connected to friends. So I think having inexpensive hobbies in your life does help your finances indirectly very, very much. I talked at one point in a video about how some research should be done, and I kind of furthered it with all the people I've dealt with. People who handle the money tend to go for a lot of walks. And you think, well, why is that? Well, you don't spend money when you're walking, number one. But number two, it clears your head. It calms you down. All the little things we get caught up in, the impulse buying and everything else, I think you're less likely to do when you're taking extended walks in fresh air. So those types of basics, I'm a huge believer in. And by the way, I tend to practice.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that I talk about in the book and in videos, I tend to very much live that way. I'm not a stuff guy at all.
Yeah.
If you came to my house, it's like 1,300 square feet. I've lived here forever and a day. I don't live in a fancy house.
Yeah.
I'm not a car guy. In fact, I don't clean my car. It's got dents all over. Like my cars are always in
you'd love my
horrible
car. It's also
shape.
a piece of crap. So
yeah, I'm just not a car guy. And I've driven a few nice cars in my life, but then I thought I don't take care of them.
yeah.
So why do I do that? And I find with cars, habituation sets in remarkably quickly. Even when you love your car when you first buy it, 2 weeks later, I'm still throwing big Turk wrappers and A&W wrappers all over the floor of my car. So a lot of the stuff I teach, I really do tend to practice. And probably the best example of that is I'm not a stuff guy. I like experiences more. I spend a lot of time alone, but I don't define myself by the stuff I have. I'm never caught up in that race to compete and look like I have more than I do. I don't really care about any of that.
Honestly, the experiences, you sound like a millennial. So
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true though. I'm a big believer in that. I'm also a huge loner, which I think, an indirect impact of that, you don't tend to spend as much money because I don't do as much socializing as most people.
Well, then my question for you kind of based off that is, what do you spend your money on? What do you like spending your money on?
Is professional sports tickets.
Oh, yeah.
So I have Detroit Lions seasons tickets. I love the Detroit Lions. I never miss a Lions game.
Wow.
I've often told my father I would not be at your funeral if it's on a Sunday afternoon. So good luck. It's been great knowing you. It really has been. And I do some traveling.
Yeah.
I tend to give a lot of money to charity, et cetera. I'm involved with a number of things on that front. But outside of the sporting tickets, I don't have an area where I really indulge myself too much. I play golf, which adds up, but I don't, belong to one of the poshest private clubs, et cetera, et cetera. As you can tell from the sweater, I don't spend it on clothing. So that's not a big part of my spending. I've had the same hairstyle since grade 1. So there's nothing really going into that either. So I got to think about, what do I spend? Dog food. Okay. My dog's very expensive.
Yeah, dogs can be expensive.
Yeah, he has done so much damage to my house, my car. He's probably the most expensive thing I've ever owned.
Yeah, my sister
In fact,
has
I'm just
a dog,
looking around right now, wondering where he is and what he's doing.
I believe it.
Yeah,
Dogs
he's a killer.
Yeah. Okay, so now I want to get to some audience questions. So this one was funny. It was a comment on a YouTube video I posted saying, hey, who has questions? His name is Chad H. I don't know what his last name is, but his YouTube handle is Drillsaman? I don't know. Anyways, he said you used to be his baseball coach. And so this guy says he was one of the most amazing people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. For years, he made it feel like he was all our personal life coaches. I have a silly question. How does it feel to be alive knowing you, Dave, inspire people on a daily basis? And do you miss coaching baseball?
Well, that's very nice. That's Chad Huber. Yeah, it is. And I remember Chad extremely fondly, and his parents. They were lovely people. Those were some of the best days of my life. I coached AAA for 6 years, and I still stay in touch with a fair number of the kids. And I'm really glad he said that, because that actually makes me feel good. I put a lot of effort in on that, and I coached with 2 other phenomenal coaches. So all great experiences. And in general, sounds corny, but giving back to the community has been the best investment I've ever made.
Yeah.
So when I look at a lot of my deepest friendships, they've been the result of charity involvements, where you've met people out at the charity involvements and then ended up becoming very closely bonded. So no, that's a lovely letter.
Yeah.
That was very nice of you to share.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. This is Christina from Waterloo, Ontario. She asks, what are other ways outside of an RRSP to help save your kids' futures, such as like helping them buy a future home or first car? Is it best to try and just max out your investments on your own? Or, what other kind of advice would you have to help your kids build wealth?
Yeah, I mean, obviously maximizing the RRSP, that's the first step. I mean, you want to at least get that $2,500 per child and annually, so you get the $500 grant. That's a bit of a no-brainer. The second advice is get the grandparents involved. This is crucial, very cost effective.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend anything, but they're now involved. I truly, kidding aside, find that most grandparents want to be involved.
Yeah.
And if they get a little push, they're happy to embrace the opportunity. They know that education is key. They also know it's very costly now, again, has risen at a faster pace than CPI. So trying to get them involved. I made a joke a book ago about what you need to do is set out brochures. And then when your parents look at the brochures about RESPs, you say, wasn't that you that? Oh, no, that was the in-laws that asked for those. Because that way you're not only exposing, you're creating some competition. So those are very good. You can use informal trust to invest for the kids. Yep. Capital gains do not get attributed back, et cetera. And I think all of those should be looked into. But the one thing I will say, because you don't hear it enough, when we're investing for kids and they're getting closer and closer to needing the money, whether it's for their college education, university education, home ownership, you've got to turn a little bit more conservative. Often now I will see a portfolio where the people think, oh, I might be buying a house in a year or two, and they've got all the monies invested in equities. Oof. And of course, as you know, you can have a prolonged downturn. You can have a severe crash. If you're thinking 5, 7, 10 years out, things normally work themselves out just fine. But if you're thinking, I might be going to university in a year, I might be buying a house in a year, you've obviously got to take on a more conservative posture.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, wise advice. Okay, next question is from Rhonda from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. How much longer do you think we will be in this bull market? And will we continue to have low interest rates for as long as Canadians and the federal government carry on a ton of debt? I guess. What's your forecast?
Well, a couple things. Love Dartmouth.
Yeah.
I spent a tremendous amount of time in Halifax. My daughter went to Dalhousie.
Oh, nice.
But my whole preaching is that Dave Chilton has no clue how long this bull market's going to last, but nor does anybody else. Yeah.
No one knows.
And that the Bob Chiltons of the world, my father, have it exactly right. He pays no attention.
Yeah.
He's placed a long-term bet on equities with that portion of his portfolio. He stays detached. He pays no attention. He thinks it'll take care of itself over 10 and 20 years. Now, he's 93.
Wow.
So 10 and 20 years for him is a bit of a stretch with his equity portfolio, but it'll come to others, et cetera. So I can't forecast that. That being said, markets are expensive. Let's look at the U.S. market, the S&P 500. It's trading at 23, 24 times forward earnings. That's expensive. There's no doubt about it. That often means that performance is going to be somewhat subdued in the upcoming decade. I wish I was smart enough to know whether that would be the case here.
Yeah.
Do I think interest rates will stay relatively low? My guess is yes. I mean, obviously, so much can change. The world is very, very much in flux right now. But precisely to the viewer's point, we've got so much debt, personal debt in Canada, government debt in Canada, that high interest rates would sabotage the economy to such an extent, you'd almost have to take them right back down, fairly quickly. In fact, we even saw it. Remember, rates went up quite a bit, and they had to soften them up a little bit because it was strangling an already struggling economy. But when governments throughout the Western world, it's not just Canada. In fact, we might be in a relatively slightly better position than some others. Let's go to the US again, where they've got a $38 trillion deficit relative to the size of their economy. It's stunning that it's gotten to that point. Can they really afford high rates? No, because in so much of the budget is going to have to go to covering interest on all of that debt. It's going to make it very difficult. So I think you'll try to see low interest rates, which could mean tricky things like yield curve control, more QE, all of these things going forward. It's going to be a fascinating next 10 to 20 years because remember, you've also got AI coming in.
I know.
And we're all trying to figure out what's it going to do to all of our lives? What's it going to do to employment?
Yeah.
I mean, I made a joke. I was writing the preface for the book. I wrote that after I wrote the book. And right while I was writing it, a buddy of mine sent me a text saying, I'm looking forward to reading the book, but what happens if AI comes along and takes all of our jobs? What would your position be then? And I said, fetal.
Yeah, I like that. I thought that was funny. That was funny.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's no easy answer to that. That would actually change society in such a huge way that I'm not smart enough to know, how you plan around that.
No, I know. Honestly, that worries me, even just as a content creator. And I'm like, oh, so now AI can replace me. Like you see AI content creators. I'm like, so this is why I'm trying to retire early because I may not have a job in 10 years. Next question is from Gina from Airdrie, Alberta. I have a daughter who just graduated university, has her first job as a teacher in Alberta, and she has thousands of dollars in student loans and wants to work on them, but also has an actual income for the first, or have an actual income for first few years, but she wants to save for a house. What advice would you give for someone new grad, just starting out, has some debt, just started to earn, isn't sure where to start?
That's the kind of question that the book covers off. So in fact, that scenario, interestingly, is very similar to one of the characters in the book. And giving a short answer to it is quite tough because there are a lot of nuances. But let me try a couple things. Number one is it's never a mistake to pay off the student debt.
Yeah.
Non-deductible, et cetera. You've got a reasonable after-tax rate of return. It frees up cash flow, builds pride, and it sets you up again to be able to take on the home debt that you're going to want to get at later. So that's not a mistake. That being said, would I do that over, say, an RRSP with matching at my work? No, I wouldn't. Yeah. Would I do that over the FHSA? No, I wouldn't, especially as this person starts out saving for the home ownership. It's not a mistake, but these are all the different things you're looking at. And again, I think that they'll benefit. I'm not trying to sell a book, but I think that particular person would benefit from reading The Wealthy Barber.
Book. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to sell the book, but I really do think that person should take
coffee. No. Okay, last question.
But that is exactly what the book is about.
Absolutely. Okay, last question for you, Bob from Beaconsville, Quebec. This isn't actually a question. It's not a question, but a big thank you. After reading the first Wealthy Barber almost 30 years ago, we followed David's recommendations exactly. Maximize your RRSPs annually, save 10% of your gross income, then move to 10% net. We did that and allowed us to retire 8 years ago without any change to our lifestyle. So it was just a nice thank you. Another
very nice.
You changed. So isn't that wonderful?
That's really nice to hear. And what's funny is I told you how I'm getting old. A lot of the people who read the original Barber are retired now.
Yeah.
And I had a guy come up to me a few weeks ago. I was giving a speech and he looked 55-ish, and it turned out he was 55. And he goes, I read your book in high school. And I'm thinking, you did not read my book in high school. But 36 years ago, he read it when he was in grade 13. Remember, they still had grade 13. He was 19. And I'm going, holy smokers, I got a guy who's 55 who read my book in high school. How old am I?
I ask myself the same question all the time. I'm like, how old am I? That's whenever I talk to a Gen Z. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm the old now. It's kind of crazy because there's not too many people, I'd say, well, maybe that I know of, like you, that has this span of affecting people for so long. And it's like you actually have evidence of what I said then. Look at all these people who I helped retire. It's really exciting and special. And so I'm so excited that now we're introducing you to potentially, new demographics, new generations who are going to learn this great advice that helped, me and other generations. And I'm so excited. Gosh, was there anything else you wanted to share or talk about to my listeners who are, in general, millennials, Gen Zs, maybe some Xers?
No, I mean, that's who, I've tended to focus on in my career. Like even on stage, I tend to speak to the people in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s. I enjoy that group and like teaching them. So I really appreciate you having me on today. I'm a fan. Obviously, you came on our podcast. Thrilled for you how well the book went over. And so it's been all good. And I hope you continue at it before AI just knocks you right out of the picture.
Dude, I know, right? I'm running out of time. I did not see this coming. Well, before I let you go, where can people, I know you're doing some really great stuff on YouTube and Instagram now. Like, I feel like, did you just start that a year ago or was it 2 years
We started
ago?
about a year ago. And frankly, weren't sure what to expect, to be perfectly honest. Same with the podcast.
Yeah.
We haven't marketed the podcast
too,
at all, but
yeah.
it's gone all the way up to number 2 in the country
Yeah.
on business podcasts. And we've got hundreds of thousands of followers now on across the different platforms. So it's all gone really well. I think people like the short soundbite. It's at The Wealthy Barber. And then the book, interesting project with the book. We didn't partner with any American distributors.
Yeah.
So we only put it in independent bookstores and Indigo. I walked away from Costco and Walmart and even Amazon. Those are 3 of my 4 biggest accounts.
Yep.
But we wanted to go all Canadian.
Yeah.
We printed it in Canada. The editors were Canadian. And I think a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
The fact we've stuck to the country, and it's been good so far.
Yeah, well, I think that's also a feedback I hear is there's not a lot of books by Canadians. They're just for Canadians. And obviously I get it because you're like, well, we want to try to get that American market or other markets. But as a Canadian, you want just that information. Talk to me about FHSAs, not 401ks, because that doesn't, relate to me. So I think it's really important what you're doing and focusing on Canada. So thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a delight. I was so excited to have you on the show, and it was so much fun being on your podcast. Make sure to check out my episode on, honestly, I've had so many people tell me they've listened to me on your show. And I'm like, have you listened to my show though? I don't think they have. They're just, I didn't even know. She said, I have a podcast too. So thank you so much.
Well, you were one of the original people in Canada who entered the podcast field.
I mean, that's again, going back to how old am I? Started this show 10 years ago. Crazy.
That's amazing. Like, good for you, because that's when podcasts were not much of a thing.
As I know, because I didn't have a way to do it. Otherwise, I'm like, you have to come to my dingy apartment. Preet, actually, he was one of my first celebrity guests, I would say. He came to my really crummy apartment rental in Toronto. And I remember the elevator wasn't working. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. He knows how broke I am. I was just starting out. But so things have, thank God for Riverside and all these other technical things that make it so easy to broadcast these and have great guests like you on. So thank you so much, and best success, continued success on your book. I know it's a bestseller already, and hopefully it stays on that list for weeks and weeks to come.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good seeing you again.
You too. And that was my episode with David Chilton. Make sure to grab a copy of his new book, The Wealthy Barber, the updated edition. You can grab it at Indigo or visit thewealthybarber.com. It's also an ebook and audiobook as well. So grab whatever format you like. Also, make sure to follow him on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at The Wealthy Barber, and subscribe to the Wealthy Barber podcast. And like I always do, I'm giving away a copy of his book, and I'm giving away copies of all the books featured on this season of the show. If you want to enter to win, I will be wrapping up the contest at the end of December and then choosing the lucky winners in January. So just go to jessicamorehouse.com/contest. You will find them all there, but also it's linked in the show notes for this episode. So if you want to find out the show notes on my website, jessicamorehouse.com/the number of the episode. It's also linked in the description wherever you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, check the description, links right there. But that's where you can find more info about my guests, what we talked about, and of course, any important links that I mention in the episode. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did, because I definitely was fangirling the whole time and just trying to keep it together. What a crazy full circle moment. I mean, not many of us ever have that point where the person who inspired you to take this direction in your career, you eventually get to interview them. Like, how crazy wild is that? Well, definitely a pinch me moment. But this whole year has been a pinch me moment, and this is kind of icing on the cake. But the season is not done yet. We've got lots of other great guests coming on the show. But for tomorrow, I've got another re-listen episode to share with you, one of my favorites from past years. So make sure to check that out. But thank you so much for watching on YouTube and listening on your preferred podcast platform. Really appreciate you continuing to support the More Money Podcast after 10 years on the air. And with that, have a good rest of your day. And I will see you back here tomorrow for that re-listen episode. The More Money Podcast would not be possible without the amazing talents of video editor Justice Carrar and podcast producer Matt Rideout, who you can find at mravcanada.com.